Right, we are back live from the Caribbean. We are in Aruba celebrating our 17th wedding anniversary. But we have to take care of business still. We had one great interview earlier with Brother Jamar Bradby. It was very revealing in his interview earlier with me at 10 a.m. Now it's 11 a.m. Caribbean Aruba time, Eastern time. And we have Great Dad coming on, the second part of our live with Mr. Johnathon Briggs. He is the owner, the creator of the Fatherhood at 40 blog. He's a journalist. He's appeared on OWN. Great guy. You know, he shared his platform with me so I could tell my story about Trey. So very thankful to him, and he is gracious enough to come on and speak to me. And what a great segue. Speak to me. A Black father's journey. Raising a son on the Autism Spectrum is available on all platforms. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart. Just pick it up. A lot of what we're talking about, a lot of what this live is based on is right here in this book. Talk about my journey, you know, finding out my son was on the spectrum, and you know, my reaction to it. You know, I had to get past my denial, and a lot of the same found out earlier from Brother Jamar. We had a lot of the same reactions, same diagnoses. So, you know, the whole point of this live is to be a safe space for Black men to speak about their journeys. And we're not alone. You know, we're human. You know, finding out your child is special needs is devastating, you know, because you have so many plans of what your child is going to be and what they could be, is passing the torch and carrying on your legacy, especially for men who grew up in a generation where we didn't have our fathers present. So this gentleman, Johnathon, that's coming on, he could speak to that as well. You know, his dad, you know, he met his dad one time, apparently, you know, and when he was, you know, I'll let him tell it, but when he comes on, but his journey is just as amazing. So just waiting for our brother to pop on. And as I said, we're live in Aruba. You know, we do our business, you know, and we make time for play, but now it's time for business. We've been here all week, but you know, we're ready. All right, Brother Johnathon is on. We're gonna bring him on. Just hit the request to join, and I'll bring you in. Really excited to speak to him, man. He has a lot. He's done a lot, seen a lot, you know, and I'm sure he has a lot. I can learn a lot from his story, just as I did with Brother Jamar earlier, you know. So, all right, just hit the request to join button, and I could bring you on. Right. As I said, if you're anybody else out there that knows any fathers that want to come on and have a discussion, we're open to discussion. Just hit us up, theamazinglysensationalkids.com. Reach out, you know, let us know, and we'll bring you on. I have no problem sharing Black men. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on my brother. All right.
Hey, brother, how you doing?
Good. How are you? Thank you.
I'm all right. I was just trying to get myself set up here.
Nah, you good.
With the little one. So,
oh, absolutely.
You know how that goes in the morning.
Thank you for coming on earlier than scheduled. I appreciate you.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Thank you.
So you were in Aruba. Or are you still there?
We're still here. We're here. We're not letting that stop us. We got business. I want to speak to you, so I don't let the location stop us. So.
I really do.
No, I appreciate you, man. You know, just coming on and sharing. You know, I love to talk to you, and I want to get into everything, your story, your journey. Really excited that you agreed to come on. I appreciate you.
No, not a problem. Not a problem. I mean, I've actually been wanting to talk to you since I profiled you on the blog.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, as I said earlier, Brother Jonathan has the Fatherhood at 40 blog. It's a great blog. You log on and check it out. You know, he has a story about me, and he allowed me to talk about Trey and my journeys, and I really appreciate you for that.
No, no problem. It was fun to do. Fun to do.
So tell the people about who you are. I
Yeah.
just said a little bit, but I'm sure you can expand on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Johnathon Briggs. I'm the founder of Fatherhood at 40, which is a blog that chronicles my life as a dad who got started with the family aspect relatively late in life. I didn't become a dad until a few weeks before my 40th birthday. And so, there's a lot more men that are becoming fathers later in life. And I think you have a lot more to offer your children when you start later because you've lived. And so I started writing about my life. What I didn't know was when I started the blog, it was about, let me see, that was Fatherhood. It was Father's Day of 2017. And so by about August of 2019 or so, we found out our daughter was on the autism spectrum. And I had started, you know how you plan these things out? You're like, yeah, I'm going to write about fashion and fitness and all this stuff. And then life really gives you something different to think about. And so I had to make the decision as to whether or not I was going to write about our family's autism journey and kind of what that meant. And so I had come from my college reunion a few years earlier, and I was asked to sit on a panel. And the panel was focused on when life goes off script. You know how life planned out, and
Yes.
life actually, real life happens, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that one way to really make the blog be meaningful was to treat it as if it were a memoir. So I started writing essays about personal things that I thought would be relatable, right? So the personal is universal. And so Fatherhood 40 was born. I did do the fashion article. I did a couple of fitness things about dad bod and all that stuff. But the turning point came when I wrote about learning how to accept my daughter's autism diagnosis, because it took us a while to find out that it was actually autism, or not to find out, to get a medical confirmation.
Right. Yes.
And then you go on to a whole other journey with other parents and just learning it's a whole other language.
Right.
IEs and ABA and BCBA and all these acronyms.
Yes.
And you don't see too many Black families talking about, publicly at least, with the exception of celebrities like, Holly Robinson and others, about their journey. And especially dads. You usually see a Black mother. It's always the mom talking about usually their son, but you don't see dads as much talking publicly about it. So it's been almost, actually it has been 5 years now. Last year, the blog was nominated as a Dad Blog of the Year.
Congratulations.
Thanks, by the Iris Awards, which is kind of like the Oscars of the parent blogging world. It was a really nice honor and surprise. I didn't win, not that in fact, you don't even know you're nominated. You just kind of find out, right? But anyway, that's Fatherhood at 40. My day job, I actually do public relations for a national lab here in Illinois. So this is really, the blog is sort of my creative.
Absolutely. That's great, man. That is a powerful blog too. That article you're speaking about, I know it well. And just speak to that. You said in the article that you didn't know if it was autism because it mainly affects boys. So how did you feel knowing that, you are in a unique situation that, you have a daughter that turned out to be on the autism spectrum?
It really has been a different journey, right? Because as I dug more into it and realized that they just haven't studied girls.
Right.
Autism shows up differently in girls, and so it was never classified as autism.
Right.
And so it just took a while to sort of, thank goodness we have the internet.
Right.
My background is actually in public health, so I know how to do research, and I was able to find, legit articles on, how autism is different in girls compared to boys, because girls tend to mimic, they socially mimic more, and so they kind of mask, you don't get some of the non-social behavior as much. And again, this is all, I have to qualify this, right? Because autism is a spectrum. And
Right.
there are those who are nonverbal or
Right.
vocabulary and all of that. Where my daughter is, and we don't use, the autism community doesn't really use these terms, but some people would say she has mild autism, right? So that she has language and she can speak, but you can tell she has some communication difficulty in terms of a back and forth conversation. And
Okay.
um, it's interesting because when I found out what was going on, I actually was relieved, because we initially got a diagnosis. Sorry.
No, no worries. No worries.
Oh,
We're live.
that's funny. That's live TV, right?
That's right. That's right.
Um, we initially got a diagnosis of sensory processing disorder, which basically means that, my daughter was kind of had heightened responses to sights and sounds and touch. She had kind of a like almost like an overreaction, right? So if something's too loud, it would hurt her ears. So we just thought it was more of like a developmental delay in,
Right.
this sensory processing thing. And then once we got the autism diagnosis, everything became more clear.
Right.
And keep in mind, my wife actually noticed that, our daughter seemed to not be developing, hitting her milestones at about 17 months. She really wasn't she didn't have a lot of language. She wasn't even, saying hi and bye and responding to things. And when you touched her, she would kind of like almost be uncomfortable being hugged. And so when we went to the pediatrician, they said, hey, why don't we just watch this for a couple more months and see how her language develops and see how she is. And if she's the same, then we're gonna, do early intervention. And, for any parent out there who suspects that your child is not developing, quote unquote, neurotypically or what we call normally,
Right.
go to the pediatrician or go to a doctor, reach out to someone who can help you start to explore that. Because it is true, early intervention works. This has like been my biggest thing about autism families, especially Black families, because we have so many other things going on in our lives in general. It can be hard to navigate and focus on things because you get those old wives' tales like, well, so-and-so's cousin didn't talk till they were 3. They just had an old soul and all this stuff. And it's like, no, grandma. We need to go to the doctor, checked out, because even if it's nothing, you still need to be taking your child to the doctor anyway to get their shots or whatever. So
Yeah.
I'll say that once we started on that journey of like, this is what it is, or, this is what we initially thought it was, you start to feel like you are, you're not helpless or hopeless, right? Like you're doing something to support your child's development.
Yeah, I mean, I laughed earlier because it's exactly what we went through. I didn't know what the signs or the symptoms were for autism, so I just thought I was a quiet child. My son Trey was quiet as well, and when we went through it, my wife, she's a social worker, so she saw the signs, but she had her family members, my family members, just pray on him, he'll be fine, and it's just he's a quiet child, like my mom said that he's a quiet child like his father, so it's we promote rule out testing and early intervention.
Exactly.
Key. Definitely is key. So that's great, man. Just want to speak to your relationship with your father because that's another blog post that struck me. That Just tell a story about your dad. You said, because I know my dad left when I was 10 years old, and it really affected me because it was unexpected. You know, I had 10 years with him. You only saw him one time, right? According to your blog, and you
Yeah.
set out to find him. How? What was that? What was that like?
Yeah. So basically in 2015, so I think I was 31. Um, a friend of mine had, he's half Liberian, half American. He went to Liberia and found his father, who he hadn't seen in 2 decades. Yeah, that's talk about a story.
Yeah.
And that and a series of other things really started getting me thinking about my own biological dad. I never missed my dad growing up because I had father figures around me. I had my uncles, I had a stepdad, I had a village of men who, you know, I really didn't even think about my dad, honestly. But it wasn't until I got older and I was thinking about, like, when I would get married, the day I got married, like, what would I be able to tell, my wife, and even, if we had kids, my kids, about my own story. And, the thing is, I used to be a journalist, and we're all about stories. And here I was going out, I had spent at that point 10 years as a journalist writing everybody else's story, but I didn't even know my own story.
Wow.
It really started to bug me a lot. And so I basically committed an act of journalism on myself. I searched public records. I remembered the only time that my mother mentioned my father's first, middle, and last name. And I plugged that into the public databases that journalists have access to. And I narrowed down the location of where my father might be to about 10 addresses in Los Angeles. And I mailed a letter to each one of those addresses with enough of the story in it so that only the person who really, was my dad could be able to fill in the rest. Because you don't want to imposter somebody,
Right.
right? Because you're, seeking these answers. And I included my phone number, and I mailed that off right before Christmas of 2015. The first week of 2005. The first week of 2006, I got a phone call at work from my father. He said, "This is Edward Briggs, your so-called father.
Wow.
Got your letter," and, we took it from there.
Wow. So
I
what was that?
saw him when I was 31 then. I had last saw him when I was 6. So 25 years had gone by. And
Wow.
I decided to fly out because I'm originally from Los Angeles. I flew out to Inglewood, California, where he was living at the time. And I met him. And
Wow.
I had it all set up, right? I had already set up an appointment for like a paternity test just to make sure. But as soon as he walked down stairs from his second floor apartment into the lobby and he opened the door to greet me, it was like looking in a mirror. There was
Wow.
no question.
Right.
We looked exactly alike. It was me, only 40 years older.
Wow.
And I still look pretty good.
Absolutely. So what was that reunion like? What was it? What was his reaction and your reaction to what was that?
Yeah, so my dad told me later, right? Because in the moment, there's like this initial shock.
Right.
But I'm a reporter by training, and so I go into this reporter mode where I don't really show any emotion. I just start asking a lot of questions. But I was nervous, and it felt surreal because you don't actually think you're gonna meet, finally meet this person. So my dad later told what happened was he invited me upstairs and he pulled out some photo albums to start kind of breaking the ice and just starting some conversation. And he sat next to me, close enough where I could feel the warmth of his body. And I noticed that his shoe size was about the same size as mine. His face was the same shape as mine, his ears and nose. And it was just, it was just an out of body experience. Later, he told me that he had lost his appetite. Like he was
Wow.
Section B. Um, and I was almost speechless, really, except so I started asking questions. And I ended up spending the weekend. I didn't have a hotel. I did have a place to stay,
Mm-hmm.
friend, but I decided to spend the night. And ended up spending the weekend just talking to him and getting to know him and asking those really tough questions, right? Like, this is what the reason I shared my story is one of those things that so many men that I talked to after I published the article, because the article came out on Father's Day of 2006 in the Chicago Tribune. So 6 months after I went to meet my dad, I was still a reporter for the Tribune. I, I wrote about it for the paper, and it came out on Father's Day. And so many men, especially black men, they were like, weren't you angry? If I ever got a chance to meet my dad, I would whoop his behind, like all this stuff. And because I didn't have that feeling of loss, then I didn't have anger. I had questions, right? Like, there's something really powerful about confronting the past. It's like a reckoning. Like, here, the person is here. My dad was like 75 or so at the time. I didn't know how much longer he was going to be alive. There's no time to be angry. Time to actually find out what you want to know. And because I was in my 30s, I could ask questions that were pretty deep. Like, obviously, one of the first questions I asked him was, did you ever try to find me? And he got really nervous around that. And he had a lot of shame. And he had shame because he actually did try to find me. But because my mother we moved from apartment to apartment to get away from gangs that were in our neighborhood. We had the privilege to be able to move. He never knew. And this is before the internet. Like, this is all word of mouth and like phone. People barely probably remember the yellow pages if they're not of a certain generation. You couldn't just find people. So analog world, how do you find a son when you yourself are not computer literate? You don't know anybody really, As it turned out, the whole time my mom and I were in LA, my dad lived at most only 6 miles away from us that whole time.
That's crazy. It's just kind of weird. Because I know I had a lot of resentment, when my dad left, and you saw him one time as a 6-year-old, and to have him leave, and you said you didn't miss him. Do you think it was a subconscious, like any kind of mental subconscious trauma that you felt like unwittingly that you didn't know? Like, because I'm curious, what pictures was he able to show you? Like, when you reconnected, like, what was he able to share with you?
What happened? So I asked my dad how he met my mom, and basically what happened with their relationship. When my mom and dad basically stopped seeing each other, my dad actually didn't know that my mother was pregnant when she left.
Okay, yes, I didn't see that.
And so she goes off, I'm born. I have a stepdad eventually, right? Because by the time I met my dad, I actually had a stepfather in my life. My mom had married. And so I never really thought of him because I had a connection. I think it would have been different had I had him and he had a presence in my life.
Got you.
The thing that's so odd about it is, even though I didn't have that connection of his presence, so I didn't have a sense of loss, when I did see him 25 years later, a piece that had been missing that I never even knew was missing was filled.
Right, that's what I think I was getting at.
Part, right? It's like he's such a part of me, even though he was never present. And you do have, it's almost like a metaphysical or like a spiritual thing of like these connections that are out there. I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. It's almost, the article was called Lost and Found.
Right.
Like, I didn't even know I had lost it. I didn't know what I had lost until I found it again. And then we built a 15-year relationship. I taught over 15 years. I started integrating my father into my life because by then I was married and then I became a father.
Yeah, that closure is important because I didn't have that actually. I mean, I reconnected with my dad 15 years later, but it was basically in passing. We were in different boroughs. I lived in Brooklyn. He was in Queens, but I never found him. I never thought to look for him because I didn't know where to look. But I didn't. I was scared about what I would think if I did see him, like how I would react. I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to cry or be weak, seemingly, in my mind,
Yeah,
because before he left, I went to him crying and asked, if he was going to leave because I saw the tension between him and my mom, and I saw that something was wrong, wasn't the same. So I asked him, and he told me he wasn't going anywhere. So when he left, I was angry, and I stuck with my mom because she was there, she helped me, she raised me. But you can't be taught to be a man from a woman. My mom
yeah,
did a great job, showing me, disciplining me, giving me the fear of God. And, but there's certain things that only a man can teach you. And I had to learn all of that on the fly. I went into my relationships, my marriage, I had a lot of trauma built up. So at least you had a stepfather that was loving, you had uncles, you had father figures, you had social fathers. That's what I like to call it.
yeah. I was, like I think it's funny because like I ended up when I got to college, I ended up joining a fraternity, and so that really broadened the types of black men that I was exposed to, and they all have different stories. Some of them knew their fathers, some of them didn't. Some of us had similar wounds, right? But what I realized is that family is not blood.
Mm,
Family are the friends and those people you get to choose, right? Like it may not look a certain way, but you get the same thing from it. Um, and I think I had enough of the tools, right? Because my mother, she evolved too, right? My mother was a teenage mom.
wow.
So what we don't realize, I read somewhere, somebody said, it was like a meme on Instagram. Somebody said, you don't realize that when you're a kid, you're watching your parents grow up.
Mm,
It's not just that you're growing up, they're growing up too. Some of our parents do better than others, right? Some of them have dysfunctions or addictions or what have you. And so that's traumatic to try to survive their own, evolution that they're trying to get to or just can't seem to get together. But, it's one of those things where my mother, she actually grew up. And I actually learned a lot from her example in terms of, I mean, part of the reason that I got into writing and communication, my mother loves to read. She actually was a librarian at one point. She
wow.
thought I'm a lawyer when she was a little girl, but she was very literate and very much into words. And so that love of words got passed on to me. So I think because I like to read, you can read. My mother used to always say, there's a book out there for every problem
Right.
that you and I would just read stuff, right? Because if you can't find it in your own world, you can find a book and read somebody else's experience about how they overcame stuff. So I think that's why I gravitated toward the memoir writing, right? Here I am. I have what I think is a pretty unusual, relatively unusual story.
Yes.
And the thing is, anybody can go to my blog and read it. Like it's free, right? I think it's the power of the stories. If you're telling them honestly, that helps other people because they couldn't see a way beyond it either. Like, what do you do with those feelings? When I was getting ready to leave my dad for that weekend, because he didn't really show any emotion until I was getting ready to leave,
Wow.
he followed me in his car, his Cadillac Seville, to the rental car place. And I was getting ready to get on the shuttle to get to the airport. He hugged me so hard. It was
Wow.
pressing 25 years of feelings into my body.
Wow.
That was the first time I saw him get so emotional. I felt his body quivering and I started to get, tears welling up in my eyes. Those wounds start to close,
Right.
right? Like you have this closure. It's kind of like this catharsis that happens. And I recognize that not everybody gets that, right? Like,
Yes.
you don't get to, and also it took a lot to like get on a plane from Chicago and go to LA and
Sure.
confront this, right? But you kind of have to do, you got to work whatever opportunity you have, even if it means writing a letter to someone who's passed. Maybe your father passed,
Yeah.
maybe they're incarcerated still. Writing a letter to them, and if they're in, in the spirit world, just burning that letter so that it reaches them, or just sending a letter. But you have to get it out. You got to get that stuff out, because even if you don't get better, or I mean, even if if the situation doesn't change, you feel better, right? Like you control the narrative of
Yeah.
how you process this, right?
And I didn't get that closure, and that's why I wrote. I put it into my writing. My dad, he developed cancer, and right when we were about to have our second child, about to have our daughter, and it rapidly progressed to where he passed like 6 months later, and I
Wow.
didn't get to ask him the tough questions. I didn't get to ask him why, and here I was avoiding this for so many years. We reconnected in 2004. He passed in 2012, so I had 8 years. You know,
Wow.
he met my son Trey. Trey was born 2007. He met him on his fourth birthday, 2011. So for that year, he was like really involved. He was coming around more often, but I never got to speak to him about what I was dealing with and my emotions and my feelings, and didn't get the answer to the question. So closure is very important. And, I wrote it in the book to heal. And you talk about catharsis. That was my catharsis. That was my healing. And
Yeah.
I had to forgive him in my writing, in my mind, so I can move on. So I wanted to ask, you said a piece of you came back to you when you met your father. Do you think that prepared you for fatherhood? Just closing that wound, or closing that, putting that final piece of the puzzle, did that prepare you? Say, okay, I'm ready to be a father now that I'm
Yeah.
complete.
No, it definitely did. In fact, it prepared me for marriage, because I met my dad again in 2006, and then I got married in 2009,
Mm,
and then we had our daughter in 2014. But I don't think that I would have felt it, honestly, until I had that sense of who I really was.
mm,
And meeting my dad, it wasn't just meeting my dad, because then once I met him, I got connected to all these family members that I'd never met. So I have
wow.
an aunt in Omaha, Nebraska. I have another one in Kansas City, Missouri. I had all these cousins. I went to their family reunion and met them in Detroit. We had a Detroit family reunion about 5 years ago. I started meeting all of these people, and to a T, they always said the same thing to me. They said, your dad always wondered where you were. He knew he had a son out there. He always talked about you. It caused him great pain.
Mm,
That was part of the reason why he drank a little bit more than he should have.
wow.
Right? Like, people torture themselves because they have regret, or they don't have closure, right? And so um, once I was hearing from all of these family members about the impact of my absence, like not knowing where I was, how that affected my dad and how it affected them, kind of get this full circle moment. And I talk to them all the time. I have an aunt in Kansas her name's Linda. I talk to her all the time, and like I said, it's a reclaiming. You reclaim all these things. You
Yeah.
feel more. You, like your book Speak to Me, right? And the puzzle pieces, which
Yeah.
have been used in the autism community, and as well as some other symbols. The pieces of you get put together in a
Right.
way that make you feel whole.
Right.
You know? And there's a lot of us walking around. We got holes. We got a lot of them, and we don't know what
Absolutely.
to do about it, right? Like, it just kind of, you sit with it, and you don't even know why you're angry, or why
Right.
you're angry, or like, what, you don't even know what's missing,
Yeah.
honestly. How, if you reclaimed it, you might actually be better because of it.
That was me for years. And my wife, God bless her, she was just adamant about, no, you need to face this head on. You need to, because it's affecting me, it's affecting our children. You're in this funk, you're moping around, you got to get this out, to you know, get this release. And, just write, I found that writing my feelings, similar to your situation when I went to the funeral for my dad, it was closed caskets. I didn't even get to see him. You know,
Wow.
the family that he was living with, one of the daughters told me that he had my picture on his nightstand, and he cried every night, and
Wow.
the first time I heard this, and is at his funeral. This is what I'm hearing. So it put in my mind that okay, I really have to look at his side of the story and look at what he was going through the time he was missing. Because I was just thinking about self, about my mom and how he left us, and he's a mean, and it's like it's two sides to every story. So that really opened my eyes to think, okay, wow, he was really tormented by our absence from each other, and I had to get the answers that I needed. So it was a process. It's definitely a process. But I wanted to get back to your lovely young daughter here. So, um, you said you were relieved to know that she was on the spectrum, that you had a diagnosis. That's a unique answer, because I know I was devastated when I found out that my son was autistic, because it meant that he wasn't, all the preconceived notions I had about legacy and about passing the torch on,
Yeah.
that went out the window pretty much. But how you say you felt relief, but were there any other emotions that you felt like? Did you feel sorry for yourself? Did you feel like, why did you ask, why me?
Yeah.
Why?
So I'm going to answer this question. Then I'm going to get back to something you said about the photos that my dad showed me, because
Sure.
there's I wanted to share with you. Um, so I did feel relief because I like to know what I'm dealing with, right? So once you know what it is, it's like, okay, great. I can come up with a plan of attack,
Sure. Sure.
focus my energy on there. But what I went through at the time, and I didn't know that that's what it was, I grieved,
Mm.
right? So once they told me, I was relieved, but then I started to well up with all this emotion of like, what does this mean? Now, what does this mean?
Right.
And, even though you don't really have, I didn't have expectations of my daughter's life in the sense of like, she's going to be a doctor by this time and she's going to do this. It was more of, you have this default assumption that your child is going to be neurotypical. And so therefore certain things are going to happen for them
Right.
at a certain pace. And when all that got thrown out the window, I started to worry about her future,
Mm.
because at that time she didn't have much vocabulary. She was just starting. We got the diagnosis because she was getting ready to go into preschool, and so they do all this testing or whatever, right? And so, and then they were talking about all these services and things that were it just felt overwhelming.
Wow.
So I had to, in that piece that I wrote, I was processing what I now know was the first stages of grief, letting go of this expectation. It's like when you go out and buy a car, right? And like you have it in your mind that you're going to buy a Jaguar. And then, you get there and it's like, this is not the Jaguar I ordered. This is, a different car.
Right.
And so you have to change what you're going to do. And I realized that the only thing that really mattered, because I did ask, like, well, because I was a father later in life, and I heard that, when you have kids later in life, there's an increased probability your child could be born with autism. Like what they call advanced paternal and maternal age. And so you start thinking like all these different things. Should I have had kids earlier? Should I have done this? And that's a normal response.
Right.
But once you get past all of that, what you realize is doesn't matter who, what, why, when, the only thing that matters is love. That is the only thing that matters. As long as you love the child that God bless you with, she's healthy,
Yes.
you need to, because the journey is not about you,
Yes.
right? Every child is their own assignment. You got to figure out this child. You got to figure out what her unique talents are. She's here for a reason. You're her father for a reason. And you got to get to a higher, and I'm not saying that happens overnight.
All right.
I had enough time to sit and process that and understand that the only thing mattered is what was happening now. And right now, we need to get her set up for, therapy to see what would work, get the school, the individualized education plan together, start to understand what is autism. How's that look in the Black community,
Right. Yeah.
So that's the part where it's like you really, I hate to use this expression because it's so like, you know, whatever. But people say patriarchy, but you got to man up and be like, look, or maybe I'll say it this way. This is the time to be an adult, right? Adulting. You got to face it and really understand what is this teaching me.
Right.
I wouldn't change a thing about my daughter now. I mean, she's but you have to. It takes a while to get there.
Yeah, that's what I speak about in the book as well. I talk about that, just that moment. Like, I was thinking about self all this time and not wanting to face the diagnosis or face the possibility that
Right.
he have an issue. And once I finally put those feelings aside, like my wife says, she has a great quote all the time. You got to mourn the child that you think you're going to have in order to move on and get them the help that they need. So, yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. It took me a little longer than others. I was in denial for a while.
You know what quote helped us was there was a teacher at our daughter's daycare. She has a daughter who has Asperger's. What they used to call it Asperger's. Now it's considered part of the spectrum. And she said, her daughter got diagnosed as like having developmental delays. And she said, just know that a delay is a comma, not a period.
Mm,
Your child will hit these milestones. They will get there, but it's going to be at their own pace.
mm,
They're not always going to be at this certain level. It just may take longer.
right.
And so that attitude really changes things. Because I see my daughter now. I mean, she has vocabulary. She's the most huggable. She will hug you. Like, she's popular with her friends. Like, things that I just wouldn't even
Imagine.
sort of come her own self, you know. And that's because we did what we needed to do as her parents to support her with that.
Early intervention is key, and definitely getting tested and getting the specialized services, speech therapy, occupational therapy, ABA, whatever that service is.
Whatever worked, yeah, whatever works. But
That's,
you were asking me about like what photos my dad showed
yeah.
me.
Speak to
So when he opened up the photo album, believe it or not, there were pictures of me. They were my school portraits from primary school. It turns out that my mother worked for the Land Records Division for the city of LA, and my dad owned property. He had bought a condo. So while I was growing up, my mom knew how to reach my dad because she had access to his address, and she would send him my school portraits every year.
Wow.
And he kept all of them. And
Wow.
that was the first time I knew that my mom knew how to reach my dad all those years, but never told me.
Wow.
But then also to see him having photographic evidence that I was growing up without him. So
Mm,
you never know what you're saying about two sides of the story, and your dad had the photo of you, right? Um, you never know what people are holding on to, even if they can't hold on to you.
wow. That's amazing. That's deep. Oh my God. I feel like ending it right there because that's amazing. But just tell the people what something that they didn't know about your daughter. Like, what do you want them to know about her? You just said a mouthful earlier, but just let them know.
Oh wow, there's a lot to say about her. She's very big. She is. I think she's going to be a performer. She loves to entertain people. She will. She does her scripting, but she tweaks it. So like she will act out whole scenes from movies. She will dance and perform. She's very she's just animated, very animated. So yeah, look out world. She's coming for I don't know if it's gonna be Hollywood or Netflix or whatever, but
Well, you're
she's
in the right. You were in the right place, coming from LA.
right. But no, she's and he comes across, I mean, she draws and colors, and she's just a very artistic person. So I'm hopeful that that will turn into something for her. The other thing that's so odd, she is really good at basketball. Like her hand-eye coordination, she will just stand there in front of the basketball hoop and just make shots like it's nothing. It's it's crazy.
They tell us that kids on the spectrum are smarter than us. They just think differently, So their mind state is way advanced, and we just want to change that narrative that because they're on the spectrum that they have some kind of dysfunction. No, they're just as amazing. They're just as sensational, as other kids, And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story, sharing your journey. I really appreciate you. So let the people know about yourself and where they can find your work and what you're doing currently.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Fatherhood40. I'm also on Instagram at father_at_40. And I'm also have my blog, of course, which is fatherhoodat40.net. I'm not active on the blog right now because I'm actually working on a book
Yes.
for young adults. So I'm trying to get my manuscript done. But I'll be back probably later this year. And you can also find me on the Good Men Project.
Nice.
They syndicate my writing as well. So yeah, just share the journey, keep sharing our stories, brother to brother, father to father. That's really what it's all about. And keep doing you with the books, right? Like I think even just the books are not just for the kids, they're for parents too, for educators.
It's for all ages, kids of all ages. That's what we talk about. The picture, the books, it's good to see, for kids to see faces that look like us, that look like them, right? That's
Yeah,
the focus. And then, we put the message in the book for the adults, because we're not reaching just adults with kids on the spectrum. We're reaching adults that don't have kids on the spectrum, because, they may not know how to treat kids that appear to be different, and it's important to educate them. And, because, a lot of people, their behaviors are based on ignorance, right? Fear of the unknown. So
exactly.
our goal is to educate as many people as possible through our work. And, you can catch us online, theamazinglysensationalkids.com, and what you said about the blog, just the spacing of it, it's perfect. It's perfect, man. I would never know if the dates weren't on there. I would never know that is so far apart, the stories, because it's so relevant to what's going on right now. So, keep doing what you're doing, man. You're doing a great, amazing job, man.
I appreciate it.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely.
want to cut it up, just let me know. Happy to chat.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
meantime, wish me luck. You know how it is writing these books. It's
Yeah,
like
it's,
never
it's a process.
time. It's yeah, never enough time. And it's a process, but I think in the next couple of years, it'll hopefully be out in the world. So we'll see.
Listen, man, it's not our time, it's God's time, right? So,
That that right there, exactly.
my pleasure. Brother Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank
I
you, brother.
really appreciate this. This conversation was great. It's amazing. I thank you so much.
Thank you.
Uh,
Safe back to the
Thank
States.
you. Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Johnathon Briggs, the author, creator, journalist, dad, multi hyphenate. Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate
Appreciate
it.
it. Thank
Take
you too. All right. And that is our conversation. I thank everyone for joining us in the lovely Aruba here. Just appreciate you guys hopping on. It was a change in the time. We got on a little early today, so we can enjoy the sunshine and enjoy the environment. All right. So speak to me. The book we spoke about, A Black Father's Journey Raising a Son on the Autism Spectrum, it's available now. We also have the latest Amazingly Awesome Amani book. It will definitely be available this Tuesday, July 19th. It's already up on Amazon. The picture is up on there, so it will definitely be available. This one is a new adventure of Amani. We follow him to the dentist, and he goes through a few challenges. So look out for that. I appreciate everybody that come on. Hi, Tanisha, Andrea. I see my mom on there. How you doing? How you doing? Thanks to everybody that came on. I really appreciate your support. Thank you for all the anniversary wishes. I appreciate you guys. We're gonna enjoy the rest of this day, and you guys take care and have a blessed day. Peace, peace.